In 1852, a man claimed that he was cursed, and he turned into a wolf, and he killed 13 people. There were witnesses to 4 of those killings. And believe it or not, those witnesses came forward and they testified that yes, they saw those people being torn to shreds by a real life wolf. Hello, and welcome to Rope. If you're new here, all we do is scour the world. We look for the unexplainable and the mysterious. We go deep into the information, and then we share our research with you. Can a person be possessed by the spirit of an animal and then transform into that animal? Well, the rational answer, and most would argue the correct answer, is of course no. That's impossible. That being said, descriptions and stories of people being possessed by the spirit of an animal and then changing into that animal can be found in cultures all over the world and dating back for nearly as long as there's been writing. Several Algonquin tribes in the frozen regions of Canada share stories of the Wendigo. That's a malevolent spirit that possesses the body of its human victim. It fills him or her with an insatiable hunger for human flesh, and as time goes on, it slowly transforms that person into a giant, hideous, zombie-like beast with a heart made of ice. And then that poor soul is forever doomed to wander the frozen tundra looking for its next human victim to devour. Then there's the werecat from European folklore. It's similar to the werewolf in its ability to transform from a human into an animal and then back again. Some legends say that the werecat can become as large as a panther and just as dangerous. In Asia, the Filipinos recount tales of the Aswang vampire, a creature that feeds on the blood of humans. During the day, it disguises itself as a beautiful woman, but by night, it transforms into an evil beast and it shows no mercy. These, of course, are just legends and folklore, but the curious mind, like mine and Amy's, wonder, just exactly where do these different accounts of folklore come from? And in the craziest realms of our imagination, usually somewhere around 2 a.m. after we've been up for 24 hours working on one of these crazy fringe videos for you, we ponder, could it somehow be possible that these strange accounts actually do happen, but they just happen so rarely and by a means that science doesn't quite understand yet, that modern society just can't believe it's possible. But then, of course, the next morning when we wake up, our sober thinking kicks back in, and we remember science has studied the human body all the way down to its DNA and is adamant that something like that just can't happen. And we think, okay, well, that's that. But it's not, right? Because then what do we do with all of those crazy real-world stories? Modern accounts that just don't fit into that science and really don't make any sense. Like the story of William Ramsey. His own parents said that he would change into a wolf. And a seasoned police officer with 25 years on the force swore that he watched as Bill Ramsey transformed before his very eyes. And then there's those crazy stories that make national news, like Vincent Lee, who just suddenly snapped, killed a stranger, and then began eating him. Or Austin Harriff, who I'm sure you remember. He left a family dinner, wandered to a nearby neighborhood, and then killed and tried to eat 2 random people in their garage. Later, when he was interviewed, he said that he honestly thought that he was possessed by the spirit of a dog. In this video, we're going to consider the crazy possibility that every once in a while, by a means that we just don't quite understand yet, something can and does possess the human body, causing him or her to transform into something else. And we'll do this by sharing the story of how 13 individuals over a period of 9 years in the mid-1800s either went missing or were found dead, and how the person responsible was tracked down and eventually caught. And then we'll share some very bizarre information that made its way into the court transcripts. Information about, you ready for this? Human wolf transformations. And a claim that the killer made that just might make you stop for just a second and ponder. And then finally, we'll take a step back and we'll look at this case more objectively in our fact or fiction segment at the very end of this video. And there, Amy's going to come on and she's going to reveal a little known secret about the killer and how it wasn't at all clear as to whether the killer was, ready for this, male or female. You won't want to miss what she dug up. It is fascinating. So, this report begins with a 19th century constable who was heading out to collect a debt. The Spanish countryside is beautiful, and in the 1800s, without the modern-day concrete jungle of roads, freeways, and buildings, no doubt it must have been even more beautiful. The scenery just might have been ideal for an experienced outdoorsman like Manuel Romasanta. Romasanta worked as a traveling salesman. He journeyed from town to town, enjoying nature and offering different goods to local merchants. By 1843, Romasanta had worked in the traveling sales trade for nearly a decade, and in all of that time, he had always made good on his debts. But for some reason, in the middle of that year, he just stopped paying his suppliers. So, a lawman by the name of Vicente Fernandez was sent out to collect the debt. Now, Romasanta didn't live in any of the larger cities, and he was constantly traveling from place to place as he sold his goods. So Constable Fernandez had to make his way through the countryside in order to catch up with him. But that was really no big deal. Fernandez was an accomplished outdoorsman, and he had done this sort of thing before. But this time, he found himself in a very challenging situation, and he never did catch up to Romasanta. Along the way, witnesses said that they saw him being viciously ripped apart by wolves. News travels fast, and before long, word got out that Constable Fernandez was dead, and a short while later, a warrant was issued for Romasanta's arrest. Now, along with being charged with defaulting on his creditors, he was also wanted for questioning in the death of Constable Fernandez. So, afraid that he just might lose his freedoms, Romasanta fled the area, and he did not give a forwarding address. Shortly after Romasanta disappeared, wolves, looking very much like the same wolves that had attacked and killed Constable Fernandez, seemingly went on a killing rampage. And that was odd. Generally speaking, wolves do not attack people, but a witness in the distance said that she watched helplessly as a woman who was herding a group of pigs was cornered, attacked, and then violently eaten by wolves. Later, a little girl alone in a meadow was also attacked and eaten as well. And not long after that, a boy, and then an old woman. And each time, it appeared as if it were the same group of wolves that was doing the attacking. Meanwhile, just a few miles from where these attacks were taking place, in the small village of Rebordecho, Romasanta set up a new business. Because he knew the Spanish countryside so well, he started offering his services as an experienced travel guide, promising to help women and children get through the rugged terrain safely. Oddly, though, some of the people who left with Romasanta never made it to their destination. As a matter of fact, they never made it to anywhere at all. Manuel Blanco Romasanta was born to wealthy parents on November 18, 1809. During his childhood, he was an intelligent and inquisitive young man. His family was rich, and that granted him a quality education, providing him with much-needed skills like reading and writing, and setting him well ahead of most others at the time. As a young adult, while most people had to work laboriously in the fields, Manuel worked as a tailor. And in 1831, at 22 years old, he fell in love with and he married a beautiful young lady named Francisca Gomez. By all accounts, Manuel had had a happy childhood, and his life was on track for success. But then, tragedy struck. Just 2 years after they were wed, Manuel's beautiful young bride died. Perhaps to stave off depression, or maybe just to get a change of scenery, Manuel became that traveling salesman. Now, it's not clear why he stopped paying his debts, but after the bizarre death of Constable Fernandez, Manuel fled to that small village of Rebordecho and he set up that travel guide service, promising to safely take women and children across the open countryside to their desired destination. But oddly, as we mentioned earlier, from time to time, and for no apparent reason, one or more of his customers would not make it to her journey's end. These bizarre disappearances began with two sisters. In 1846, Juanita and Manuela Garcia hired Manuel to take them and their children to the oceanside city of Santander. Now, the trip to Santander was at least a 2-week journey, and it wasn't easy. Without a guide for 2 women and their children, it would have been all but impossible. But, as fortune would have it, Manuel was there, and he was happy to offer his services, and for a reasonable fee. And although it was a long and challenging journey to Santander, he assured them that he would deliver them safe and sound to their destination. Not long after they left, however, Manuel returned to Rebordecho, and he returned alone. And when he was asked what happened to his customers, he said that nothing happened to his customers. He said that the journey was smooth, and he swiftly got them to their destination, and then he returned. But many of the villagers questioned that. A round-trip journey to Santander would take at least a month, and Manuel was back much too soon for the math to work out. But no one ever came around asking about the Garcia sisters, so over time, the mystery of what happened to them and their children just kind of faded into the background. Business went on as usual, and Manuel didn't have any more of those impossibly fast journeys to faraway lands. Well, that is, until someone else asked to be taken to Santander. Between 1850 and 1851, Manuel made several trips, guiding people through the open countryside to various destinations. Most of those trips were uneventful, and they didn't raise any eyebrows. But 2 of those trips were once again to the faraway city of Santander. A woman named Antonia Raul and her 2 daughters commissioned Manuel to take them to Santander, and again, like he had done with the Garcia sisters, Manuel returned in record time. And when questioned, he gave the same response that he had given 4 years earlier. The trip was easy, and he delivered his customers safely and soundly. And then he returned swiftly. Now at this point, because of what had happened in 1846, the villagers began to talk, and they didn't forget so easily. And then a woman named Josefa Garcia hired Manuel to take her and her son to Santander. And again, Manuel returned way too quickly for him to have actually made that trip. This time, however, things were different. Along with all of the villagers believing that there was absolutely no way that he could have gotten to Santander and back so fast, not long after he returned, to his surprise, Josefa's relatives arrived from Santander, asking about her. And the villagers, of course, pointed to Manuel. When Josefa's relatives went looking for Manuel, he was nowhere to be found. Now, remember, all this time, Manuel has been wanted in connection with the death of Constable Fernandez. And all of these disappearances got the attention of the authorities, tipping them off as to where Manuel had been hiding out for the last 8 years. So several people were sent out to retrieve him. But when they got there, Manuel was gone. Manuel had found out that several constables were on the way to arrest him, and he wasn't about to have any of that. So, being a man of means, he acquired a high-quality passport, and he fled. This time, however, the law wasn't so quick to give up. Once they arrived at his last known location, and they learned of all those missing customers of his, as a fugitive, he took top priority. And over the next several months, it was like a game of cat and mouse. They would get to where they thought that he was, only to find out that he had left the day before, and sometimes just that morning. But finally, they caught up with him. In July of 1852, they found him working as, check this out, of all things, a laborer in the small village of Nombela in the province of Toledo. Well, he was arrested immediately, and he was taken back to stand trial for the murder of 9 people. But before the court case was over, he confessed to killing 13. Romasanta sat in court for months, as the prosecution just brought a slew of evidence against him. They started with the mysterious death of Constable Fernandez, and although they couldn't find many of the bodies, they provided a plethora of witness testimony and other evidences solidly supporting the charge that he had murdered several of his customers over a period of 9 years. The case was pretty solid, and surprisingly, Romasanta did not deny any of the charges. As a matter of fact, not only did he confess to killing the 9 people that he was charged with, but he also confessed to killing 4 others, claiming that he desperately needed to release that terrible darkness and bare his soul. But although he confessed, he still claimed that ultimately it wasn't his fault, and that he was truly innocent, stating that, get this, years ago, a curse had been placed upon his family, and he was the fulfillment of that curse.
The first time I transformed was in the mountains of Koso. I came across 2 ferocious-looking wolves. Suddenly fell to the floor and began to feel convulsions. I rolled over 3 times, and a few seconds later, I myself was a wolf. I was out marauding with the other 2 for 5 days until I returned to my own body, the one you see before you today, Your Honor. The other 2 wolves came with me, who I thought were also wolves, changed into human form. They were from Valencia. One was called Antonio and the other Don Genaro. They too were cursed. We attacked and ate a number of people because we were hungry.
Romasanta confessed to killing the constable, and he confessed to killing the customers that he was charged with killing. But he said that he only did so as a wolf, and he said that while he was in that wolf form, he was unable to resist the insatiable hunger that he had for human flesh. He also said that in addition to those killings, he and the other two cursed men that he just spoke of in that last quote, Antonio and Gennaro, together, the three of them, killed and ate that woman herding pigs, the little girl in the meadow, that boy, and the old woman. The court, however, did not buy that, as there were witnesses in those cases, and those witnesses clearly saw that it was a pack of wolves and not humans who killed those poor people. But because he had made such outlandish claims of being cursed and forced to turn into a wolf, he was examined by physicians. They were looking for any type of mental illness, and they all concluded that he was perfectly sane, and his statements, therefore, just must be a ruse in some desperate attempt to get a lesser sentence or maybe an acquittal. But one of the statements that was made by one of the prosecution's physicians does make one ponder.
He claims that sometimes he becomes a wolf, and then, against his will, he's forced to tear his fellow man apart with claws and teeth. And to do this, he rolls around in the dirt, a condition previous to his transfiguration. And what's more, he remembers his acts, his victims, and the circumstances of their death. These are disturbing memories that he states stand in the way of every step between his heart and his existence. He claims, in a word, to be a fatal and mysterious being, an evil genius cast by God into a world that isn't for him, created on purpose for evil, towards which he is thrust by the hidden force of an overpowering law, by which he fulfills his fateful and dismal destiny.
What a report, huh? Human wolf transformations? Never, right? This is an interesting report, though, because until the very day that he died, Romasanta never did deviate from his claim of being cursed to change into a wolf and go after human flesh. But there are a few discrepancies that we really should address. To gather the information for this report, Amy read the 220-page law review of the case that was published in 1859 and in a different language. She also got her hands on some old newspaper clippings, and she visited several different websites. Challengingly, though, as with most of the reports that we provide, many of the sources conflicted with each other. So, for some of the information, she had to extrapolate her best guess. For example, no sources actually stated that witnesses saw Constable Fernandez being eaten by wolves, but an article published the same year that he was killed stated that wolves had committed a horrifying sacrilege in Valencia. That's the same place that Romasanta claimed the other two cursed men came from. And that was quite a coincidence. So we put that in. There were other minor discrepancies as well, but as I said, Amy combed through it the best she could, and she pulled out the facts that she thought was relevant. Most historians today believe that Romasanta should be classified as a serial killer, and that he only claimed to be cursed as an attempt to get a lighter sentence, which he didn't. He was condemned to death. Amy did discover something very interesting, and we went back and forth as to whether or not it really belonged in this report. But in the end, she wanted to share it with you. So, here she is to share what she found. Amy?
Hey.
So, what did you find out?
Well, there's been quite a bit of speculation about Manuel being male or female. Records show that the parish of Santa Eulalia de Escos issued a baptismal certificate for a baby girl called Manuel Blanco Romasanta. But the name used in parish confirmation records is actually Manuel. And his neighbors described him as being feminine. Now, In the mid-2000s, there was a pretty extensive study done on Romasanta, and on January 3rd, 2013, a 38-page paper was released called Forensic Anthropology of the Case of Manuel Blanco Romasanta, the Werewolf. And in it, the forensic anthropologists hypothesized that Manuel likely suffered from feminine pseudohermaphroditism.
Okay, and this is pretty interesting, but why did you think that it was important to put into this report? How does it tie together?
Well, I like to tell the whole story, not just the parts that lean towards the supernatural. I don't make this stuff up, I actually research it. And I believe that this might be evidence that Romasanta may have suffered from a chemical imbalance, and doctors think this could have been the origin of his criminal behavior. Oh, and just to clarify for our viewers, Manuel's sentence was eventually changed from the death penalty to life in prison.
So, you're saying that you really don't buy the claim that he was a victim of a curse?
I'm not saying that I don't believe in the supernatural, but in this case, yeah, I think he was just lying.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Sure.
So, what do you think? Was Romasanta a victim of a curse? Or was he just a sociopathic serial killing liar who made up the whole werewolf idea just to try to save his neck? In Romasanta's case, no witnesses ever came forward to say that they saw him transform into a wolf. But not all cryptid cases are like that. Some have so many witnesses that it's almost impossible to deny that there's something behind the reports. Like the thousands of accounts of mysterious winged creatures all over the world, from giant birds to something evil. Unexplainable reports have come in, ranging from people saying that birds and other flying creatures have stolen their children, to witnesses claiming that they've spotted demonic creatures flying around disaster sites just before the disaster happens. For an entire week in 1909, thousands of people from 30 different towns saw a strange creature flying in the skies overhead. They said that it had the body of a man, the wings of a bat, and the head of a ram. They said that it was definitely satanic in nature. We did a complete report on this, and if you'd like to see it, it's here. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Rope.
Damon and I really enjoy bringing these reports to you, and I love researching the paranormal.
And again, I guess that ties it up for another episode here at Rope.
Thank you.
Thank you.